Alright, my first Deltarune video. Should I talk about the characters, world building, themes? No! I want to talk about the shipping. Now, I'm fine with every non-problematic ship, but I think there is one ship that's the best, and that's Kralsei, the romantic pairing between Kris and Ralsei. As a Kralsei fan slash Kralsei agenda spreader, I want to be clear why Kralsei is so freaking cool and debunk the Kralsei antis that are misinformed about the ship. Also, by the way, if you don't like Kralsei, why? Seriously though, I'm not hating on your ship, I'm just establishing why I love mine. This isn't really a video on Kralsei moments, by the way, just play the game if you want to see a whole bunch of those. This is more of an analysis of Kralsei's dynamics and why I think Kralsei is Deltarune's best ship. I'm gonna divide this discussion between the first two chapters and the recently released chapters because I think they're substantially different in how they're written. Chapters 1 and 2 feature classic Kralsei propaganda such as, "It's okay to express yourself, Kris," the hugs, the acid tunnel ride, etc. Also, just Ralsei's general behavior. Toby Fox writes these moments with such a friendly, cute, and mellow style that is so adorable. Like, I don't even like overly cute things, but Ralsei's kindness and courteousness paired with Kris's stern stoicism and, as we learn, prankish disposition is just so contagious, I immediately ship them. And so many of the fans did as well. The problem, however, is that people are stupid. So many people from this era thought Ralsei was Azrael. The issue with that is, they aren't. Yes, even pre-chapters 3 and 4, there's clear evidence that they're not the same, look the same, act the same, etc. The only thing related between the two is that their names are anagrams and they're both goats. Nothing else. Narratively, they serve different purposes. Character-wise, they're entirely distinct. This theory sucks. To quote Cookie914's amazing theory video that was a godsend during these times, Azrael is in college during Deltarune. There's not even a possibility they're the same person. Different experiences, different roles, different beliefs.
But where am I?
It could be an aesthetic choice, or that Ralsei and Azrael are thematically linked. Here's more shit to read on screen. Also, narratively, how would that be satisfying in any freaking way? If Ralsei was Azrael, cool. Then what? Side note, a lot of Deltarune fans are in this weird mindset when creating theories. They're what I like to call shock theories, and that they're different from crack theories because the author doesn't think that their batch theory is funny, but think it's right. Jaru, who's probably a really great person IRL, I'm just gonna criticize him right here, gets a lot of hate from the Deltarune community. Probably because his videos are badly edited, poorly paced and scripted, and sometimes make no freaking sense. The problem for me is that a lot of the theories he makes and a lot of the theories the Deltarune community makes don't take in the fact that narrative structure and good writing is important. This theory is bad because if it happened in the game, it would suck, and there's no way Toby would write what is essentially a creepypasta. He would write a really well-written creepypasta though. Also, to address the fact that he got the Aubrand smog theory, the duster theory, whatever you want to call it, right? Well, that theory was narratively satisfying. That video still has the same issues as his other videos, but with the theory alone, Aubrand smog was interesting in that you can expand it further. What if Rudy died at some point in the game? Could you revive him in the Dark World? It's cool when a theory is expandable, narratively good, if it has story implications, and if it's thematically substantial. If you're a Deltarune theory person, please take this in mind when you're making your next theory. This is not a requirement. You can do whatever. You can make whatever theories you want. I don't care. Anyhow, moving right along to chapters 3 and 4, Kralsei. Holy shit. These chapters killed me. Chapters 3 and 4, Kralsei still has that lovely tenderness at heart. How could it lose that when both of the characters are absolute sillies? But there's a new aura here. Something new. Something very, very interesting. There's a surreal absurdism that Toby writes in both these characters, and I mean actual philosophical absurdism. I fucking love philosophy. Shout out CJ the X. Anyhow, that line from Susie about "there's nothing that pisses me off more than people who don't tell you the whole deal" doesn't appear Kralsei, but it is so incredibly Kralsei when you think about how both of these characters, who Susie sees as her closest friends, her companions, share a bond in that they're hiding something so substantial and grandiose that they couldn't possibly say or have control over. There's a scene from, and I think this is the official title, the Weirdy Weird Snowgrave Genocides route in chapter 2 when you give the snow ring to Ralsei. He says cutely, "Are you proposing?" It's really f***ing cute, man. Until you realize Kris is probably frightened, thinking, "Oh god, is this beastly entity possessing me trying to give Ralsei the snow ring to make him more powerful so it can make me manipulate, degrade, and control him like it did Noel? Or is it trying to tell me who they want to see covered in ice and gone away next? What is it saying? What is it going to do?" That type of cosmic horror writing is all over chapters 3 and 4, and I want to talk about that. But the problem is that some people think Kris doesn't like Ralsei and Ralsei doesn't like Kris, even after these chapters. It's all
Ralsei only cares about the player.
Or
The player controls Kris, who doesn't actually like Ralsei.
dude, they like each other. If you're still in the belief that Ralsei only cares about the player and not Kris, see Ralsei's compliment at the end of chapter 4 when he states,
You were cool when you played the piano earlier.
The piano symbolizes a direct personal connection to Kris. It's an obstacle the player, the soul, who sucks at / can play the piano, couldn't pass that obstacle without Kris. It's something that is thematically representative of Kris and their struggle of freedom. Ralsei compliments Kris and only Kris in that scene, not the player in any freaking way. I believe Ralsei knows that Kris is being controlled, and I'll expand on this later, but I think Ralsei saying this is so emphasized by Toby Fox since he wants us, the player, to know that Ralsei truly, genuinely likes Kris for themselves. Meanwhile, there are all sorts of moments of Kris liking Ralsei. They subvert player control when we try to be mean to him. They call out the player for thinking Ralsei and Azriel look similar twice. Sure, other characters still think they look similar, but this actually delves deep into the Deltarune racism theory, where Susie, Noelle, and every player who thought that these two characters were the same were actually, you know, racist. But seriously, I think Toby Fox including these scenes serve to show that Kris, who has been around goats for way more than we and other characters have, is more valid to have an opinion on whether the two look the same or not. And they clearly don't think they look similar. They laugh at it. They laugh at the idea of it. They laugh at the player picking that prompt. It's so fucking stupid. If you're still somehow an Azriel as Ralsei / Azriel looks like Ralsei / Azriel and Ralsei are literally connected type of person, then you're wrong. And if we look at T-Theory, which the original creator debunked the Kris hates Ralsei aspect of, we can see that Kris heals 60 HP from Ralsei, implying Kris doesn't like Ralsei that much. That is still higher than Noelle healing 50 HP from Ralsei, who's a stranger to her. And, this is really big and not known by too many in the community, in the chapter 4 code, if Kris is nice to Ralsei with the text, "It's okay not to smile," therefore prompting Ralsei to tell Kris they were cool if they played the piano, Ralsei T will now heal Kris 100 HP. Yes, you can't have the Ralsei T or any character T post chapter 2, and yes, Toby Fox still changed the code in the game to prove a point. 100, bro. I actually love how Toby Fox wrote this because it implies that Kris will care about Ralsei if they see Ralsei truly care about them. Alright, now I'm going to talk more about the different dynamics that are written all over chapters 3 and 4 regarding Kralsei. In these chapters, Toby Fox writes doomed androgynous yaoi. Think about it, both Kris and Ralsei are impossible souls cursed with having to understand dangerous monumental stakes that threaten their true independent selves and the ones they care about. Ralsei is a darkener, bound with the belief that he has no independence and should only exist to serve lightners. Add to that is his knowledge of the prophecy and his role as the Prince of the Dark, which bears an inconceivable standard and a horrifying uncertain certainty of whatever aspects of the prophecy Ralsei is unsure / is afraid of. His loneliness is derived from having to bear such a high status as a darkener and a low status as a servant to the lightners. Similarly, Kris is bound by the soul's existence, removing their independence, changing their identity to one not of their own, and making them do or say things that they may not want to do. Add to that their knowledge of Carol's probable criming, their allegiance with her in the night, and their buried childhood trauma implied by chapter 4's egg art therapy room. Their loneliness is derived from all of that and their general isolation from everyone. Both Kris and Ralsei are lost, lonely souls. And yet, they find each other. They relate and connect to each other. They even defend and comfort each other. Despite everything, their true love can still emerge in the darkest of places. That's why they're a fantastic duo in an emotional, thematic, and narrative context. In every scene where they connect in chapters 3 and 4, there's such an overbearing force that seems to separate them. Kris being in the player's control and Ralsei's inability to control the prophecy he's bequeathed with is cosmically horrific because the impossible circumstances and creatures they encounter are hurting them physically and emotionally, preventing their intimacy. And if you want to look at it another way, the prevention of both of them losing control and not being independent causes their intimacy. It causes them to connect with each other. I want to reiterate how interesting Toby Fox develops their relationship. Instead of these two characters that immediately like each other, they meet and interact, they talk, and they grow closer and closer as they face life-altering, life-destroying, and life-changing moments. In chapters 1 and 2, it's often argued that Kris hates Ralsei, when I believe that they're just really neutral towards them. Kris's neutrality towards Ralsei, whether it's them believing they like the soul, not them, or Ralsei just being too positive all the time, whatever it is, that feeling is transformed as you play the chapters and they grow more comfortable with Ralsei, as Ralsei becomes more mature, honest, and sensible with them. I think it's interesting that both Kris and Ralsei's dynamics are emphasized in chapter 4. Kris has a fucking breakdown in the weird route, but there's an extremely nuanced melancholy as well in the normal route, to Kris having limited time to eat, play piano, and demonstrate their independence without the soul. Ralsei's breakdown at the end of chapter 4 is similarly caused by a lack of control regarding the prophecy and his role in it. The gang's preordained fate seems so tragic that Susie emotionally blocks it off while Ralsei weeps. Also, the ability to cheer or hurt Ralsei here is so interesting. It speaks so much about Deltarune's meta-narrative and how much the player is becoming even more of an overbearing force in the game, but also losing control at the same time, like regardless of the route, is so strange. I believe Kris doesn't interrupt here because they legitimately couldn't/didn't expect the player to say something so fucking cruel to Ralsei while he's crying, or, like some players have commented, thought, "Good, keep smiling," was somehow a good response. I guess Shay was right. Also, no one mentions this, what if Ralsei also doesn't like Kris in the beginning of the game? Sure, they blush, they're flesh, they're absolutely fluffed, but it's probably an act at first too. What if every compliment of Ralsei to the player was an act in chapters 1 and 2? I think Ralsei's reaction to Kris's piano playing in comparison to the player's piano playing, which Suzy actually notices seems fake, implies that he has been putting up as much of an act as Kris. Remember when I said that I believe Ralsei knows that Kris is being controlled? I want to emphasize this theory on possession and player control and how it relates to Kralsei's dynamic. The theory is that Ralsei knows about the soul since he talks about it in some early dialogue, mentions Kris knowing a lot about the prophecy and indirectly referencing us if you unlock piano stuff early without discovering the notes first, so Kris wouldn't have technically known about the notes. This incredibly revealing chapter 3 moment where Suzy makes an offhand remark that makes Ralsei believe the player started controlling Suzy, and Ralsei looks directly at the player. And, important for this video, the theory implies that when the screen blanks out, Kris and Ralsei talk to each other, as implied by Ralsei's dialogue in chapter 2 saying,
So that's why.
Now alongside that theory, consider Ralsei's compliment to Kris and only Kris. I believe that Kris's feelings towards Ralsei wasn't the only thing that developed. Ralsei's feelings toward Kris also did. I'll talk about this more later, but the community seems to assume that Ralsei has always had this one-sided crush on Kris that didn't really develop or had any chance of developing until chapters 3 and 4. These two grew to have a mutual understanding of each other. The more independent these two characters grow, the more they grow towards each other. I think it's interesting if the only times these two can talk to each other is when the screen blanks out. I think these are moments when Kris and Ralsei are actually communicating with each other fully as their own. Hopefully romantic and they're kissing and etc. And sure, Kris and Ralsei may not have talked when the screen blanks out in chapter 4 because of Ralsei leaving to destroy signs of the last prophecy. But, and this is speculation, Ralsei may have just said something to Kris in this short time, which is why Kris just stands there. Or, Kris could have walked alongside Ralsei after the screen blacks out, and Toby Fox didn't include that here because it is not yet time in the narrative to reveal that Kris and Ralsei are talking and kissing. It's so fascinating to ship these two because their dynamic is so interesting. There's a sorrowful despondency with the fact that Kris and Ralsei get barely any time to talk, to be themselves, to be with each other without interruption. It's sad that they have to put on an act with Suzy and each other and just can't show their true selves whenever the player's there. They can only talk when the player isn't looking or listening. This is some Chainsaw Man shit. One of the most intimate Kralsei scenes, Kris eating an apple from Ralsei's hands, happens off screen without the player. Did Gerson know Kris was being controlled and after telling them to close their eyes, initiate a Kralsei moment? Who knows? But also Gerson ships Kralsei headcanon confirmed. The complexity of these two characters are so often dismissed by the Deltarune community. Kris is someone possessed by the soul, trying to be free, and it's sad how barely anyone notices the major change they went through. They're fighting to get their identity back. Ralsei is someone trying to find their own independent identity, like as a real living person, not just an item. They're fighting to receive an identity that is beyond their own. I don't care if you're a Darkener, you're a being worthy of love and respect. Though Suzy does this too, Kris's recognition of Ralsei as their own individual is so fascinating because they both share a general loneliness, unfamiliarity, and isolation because of their identity issues. Also, Ralsei has a self-hate problem that's not really apparent with Kris. Other than the Deltarune community not liking Ralsei, some bitches are still calling him evil. The funny part with a lot of the Deltarune community not liking Ralsei is that Ralsei also doesn't like Ralsei. From chapter 1, he never expects his feelings of love to be reciprocated because he believes they aren't valid in the first place. You shouldn't feel feelings if you're a Darkener mindset. This is like alien stage Ivan levels of romanticism, remorse, and self-hate characterization. What's funny is that like both Ivan and Ralsei get mischaracterized by the communities as the evilest of all evils or someone who's completely innocent. There's nuance to both of them! And also, watch Alien Stage, it's really good. Anyhow, Ralsei, I believe, is still hiding something. He knows about the concept of the soul based on the piano dialogue and his general attitude towards Kris, but hasn't revealed it yet. The Deltarune community seems to assume that if you hide something from them, then you're evil, which is really funny because 1. Ralsei could be hiding something to protect his friends and the whole world, and 2. I think this is an intentional move to hide information from us both as a way to challenge game stories' convenience of revealing information at the correct time, and because why do we deserve that information? Why do we need it? Ralsei doesn't know us, why should we get the information he's hiding? I say, let him keep it and tell only Kris, who seems to be more informed on this situation. And I don't think I need to say how Kris gets mischaracterized by the community. They're not a self-insert, they use they them pronouns, the player, as represented by the soul, is a separate and important character of the story. And Kris is not necessarily evil, just for teaming up with the knight and Carol. Side note, so many Deltarune and Undertale players throw around the word evil, like Toby Fox would just have a character who is bad because I'm evil. No. Toby Fox, as shown in Undertale, writes characters who do bad things but aren't evil just for the sake of it. Child killer Asgore was regretful and suicidal for what he had to do. Flowey was compassionless, not emotionless, and Kara is not evil. Are the things they did right? No. But were they either good at heart or have the reasons they became that way? Yes. If you don't like them for what they did, then that's perfectly acceptable too. What I'm saying is that in regards to Deltarune, with Ralsei and Kris, we can only really speculate. There's no obvious conclusion whether Ralsei and Kris have the right or wrong intentions and are doing the right or wrong things. Alright, my last paragraph of the stupid script. I want to debunk the idea of the anti-freedom Kralsei interpretation that Bluesu included in her video. I had the script finished like a day before she uploaded that video, bro. Again, this is no hate, I actually really like this video, but with discussion videos like this, I think it's important to discuss things, and this is a pretty popular Kris and Ralsei video that the greater Deltarune community as a whole has seen, so I wanted to share my take on it. Anyhow, there's this debate about whether Kralsei, as a narrative, is gonna go towards a pro-freedom interpretation, which I think it is. The two characters find emotional connection through their shared lack of freedom. Ralsei finds solace in Kris through finding his own identity, as Kris encourages him to be independent. Meanwhile, Kris finds solace in Ralsei through what I suspect will happen and what seems to already be happening, being their true selves around Ralsei. I believe Ralsei and Kris will become further independent and free, creating a growth in their personal bond and relationship. Conversely, the anti-freedom narrative speculates that Kris doesn't really love Ralsei because T-Theory exists, this festival dialogue about Kris being weird about going to the festival with Ralsei exists, and Asriel-Ralsei thematic connections means the ship is a no-no and Toby Fox is using Kralsei to call out fans for bad shipping. The thing is, Kris has now shown agency that implies that they like Ralsei. The T-Theory has basically been debunked, and the point of the festival dialogue is to show evolution. Bluesu asks, why did Ralsei, who invoked Asriel, have a one-sided crush on a controlled Kris, and why was there a point in time where Kris didn't like Ralsei as much as they did in chapters 3 and 4? As the game dialogue shows, their relationship was an evolution, and as I believe / theorize, Ralsei did not actually like Kris before. I think Ralsei was simply a suck-up to the soul, not Kris. There was never a one-sided crush because Ralsei's crush was also a act to the soul. I think that there may have been emerging feelings in chapters 1 and 2, and if you believe that the choices the player has are based on Kris's thoughts and they just happen to have a lot of intrusive thoughts, which explains the weird route, then their development towards letting each other be free is why their relationship is so vastly different between the chapters. And again, with the Asriel stuff, many think it's intentional for Toby Fox to include Ralsei and Asriel's similarities to make players uncomfortable with shipping Kralsei. Like, here's the thing. I don't know if Toby Fox is utilizing the meta-narrative to go against problematic shipping in fandoms. He's doing a lot with that funny little thing, but the thing is, if he is using Kralsei to cover that, I believe many other fans just wouldn't like it. Like, there's better ways to tackle problematic shipping than going, you see these two characters? I'm gonna write the most emotional and complex story between them and include several romantic connections, but I'm actually making fun of you because you're bad for shipping them because they're actually related. It turns out you're bad for thinking they're shippable, even though I made them shippable. I just believe Toby Fox wouldn't do that because I have faith in his writing. Also, I think the Kris dialogue indicating the differences in appearances was added by Toby Fox because people said you couldn't ship Ralsei because Ralsei and Asriel may have looked similar. I think this is a literal direct scream by Toby to say, you can ship them, to anyone who's still doubting. All that to say that Kralsei is my favorite ship because I think it's the most interesting dynamic in the entire game. The characters are both incredibly complex and undermined by the fandom, and the way they're written is so intricate yet concisely understandable, like a Portal game, I don't know. Kralsei is an androgynous doomed yaoi about how love can emerge in dark places. It's kind of like this one game about how light can emerge from your soul despite being in impossibly dark circumstances. I forgot the game's name though. Anyhow, Kralsei can be summed up with this quote by small indie artist, Rihanna. We found love in a hopeless place. Thanks, Toby Fox.